And contributors on Conklin and Company are not necessarily those of 13 ABC. Now, Conklin and Company continues with Take 3, commentary and analysis from our panel of political contributors.
All right, welcome back, everyone. It is time for Take 3, a couple of weeks off. Now we bring panelists back to talk about the mayor's race and the city council race. Tom Troy, politics writer for The Blade, and Skylar Meadows is back, host of her own program on the Juice 107.3, actually competing against yourself this morning, Skylar. So if, when this program's done, folks can turn it on over and you have guests on yourself. So thanks for coming in, and former council candidate once again as well. Let's get right to the mayor's race. We just had the mayor on earlier today. Kind of a hot button issue this past week, Tom, came up, and it was right to work. But as you said, right to work not necessarily directly involved in how you run the city of Toledo. So it's kind of interesting that has reared its head this week.
Well, it's given a lot of people some food for thought as to whether the mayor made a smart move politically in speaking his mind. Not surprising, he's not committed on right to work, for or against it. It really sounded like he would not be an opponent of right to work. His position was, well, we'll see how it plays out in Toledo. But the interesting thing about it is that it's really not a Toledo issue at all. The mayor doesn't have anything to say about it. The reason this came up is that we had a forum that was put on by a Tea Party group, the Northwest Ohio Conservative Coalition, and they raised the question because it's important to them. This same group held a forum with city council candidates and raised the question there as well. So we give them credit for...
Kind of dominated the whole week.
Yeah, you give them credit for having forums so the citizens can get some idea of who's running. But, what's right to work got to do with the issues in the city of Toledo?
Yeah, in the end, Skylar, does that topic, that issue, have any impact on what happens on Tuesday, September 10th, when primary voters go to the polls?
Yes and no. The no part is it's not something that we have to deal with right now, but there are other places in the nation, and so Ohio goes. We will eventually have to deal with it. However, I think that's very forward thinking. So like you said, an organization raises the question at a forum, well, the people that came out to the forum, because it was all Q&A from the audience. Right. And so the news cycle goes. But we have to decide what is important in our city and what the candidates should be focusing on for the time frame in which we're voting. That's very futuristic. That's why I said yes and no.
All right, and this coming Wednesday, 13 ABC and The Blade will hold a mayoral debate. The four top candidates or primary candidates, however you want to say, Konwinski, Cox, Covey, not involved here, but the top four are, and we can safely say that I think they would probably or perhaps garner the most votes in that primary coming up. So what does the debate, if at all, how does that impact the election going forward, Tom?
Well, obviously people watch. I think people haven't made up their minds in this election. And somebody suggested that to me, that's the reason that we've seen lower levels of early voting. And there's a very low level of early voting. It could be that people don't care. I'm thinking maybe it's people are still making up their minds. Maybe particularly between D. Michael Collins, Anita Lopez, and Joe McNamara. They're trying to appeal to some similar groups. The union groups are all very strong in their positions on unions. So maybe they're still jockeying for support. People think that Mike Bell is going to get through the primary okay, and it's really a contest to see who gets the second spot.
Right. Skylar, those three really battling it out, and Joe McNamara spending a lot of money to get his message out.
Absolutely. My colleague here, Tom Troy, wrote an article about that and indicating how much everyone spent and earned and so on and so forth. But the point comes down to, does your money equal your message? And I talk about this constantly. Right. So no matter how much you spend, because other piece besides apathy and not knowing, we have a plethora of candidates this time, which is fantastic, is the other piece. Are people really dialed in until after Labor Day? See, that's the point.
Waiting for the playoffs.
Right. When do people start paying attention to the primary? But they need to this time.
What type of turnout are we looking at on September the 10th, Tom?
Well, you can go back historically, and 4 years ago, if you remember, it was Mike Bell, Keith Wilkowski, I'm going to leave somebody out, Jim Moody was a Republican, D. Michael Collins ran, Ben Conop ran that year, And we had, I think, a turnout of about 17% of the registered voters in Toledo.
Which is really sad.
So let's assume we have that similar number. That's about 37,000 voters.
But we can't really assume that because there are a couple of things that come into play this time that weren't in play last time. Number one, no county in Ohio can pay for absentee ballots, and absentee ballots factor in the primary. So, I mean, they're not 100% of the vote, but they certainly could push candidates battling out over the edge.
Voters
so
having to pay the $1.12 to send in those absentee.
Right. So now that the onus is on us to send in the money for our vote, and that's brand new, that may impact the number of votes that actually make it and get counted. And number two, the other thing is that are people understanding that the primary is the primary and that this is it? You have to vote for who you need to, or are they just allowing whoever comes in? Because it's nice to have Labor's, support, but if Labor doesn't come out and vote for their candidate, then you might be unpleasantly surprised.
Outside looking in. Right. Okay, let's talk about the council races. You mentioned there was a forum this week, Tom. Haven't been many of them.
No.
With the council candidates, at-large candidates, 6 seats, 17 candidates. How do you wade through?
Well, you could base it on party if you vote that way. I think there's 6 Democrats. I think there's 7 Republicans. Got 1 Green Party candidate, and then a couple, 2 or 3 independents. When you don't have party label, it's hard to know. It's hard to guess what people are thinking. So it is important to pay attention. The candidates are out there trying to get their names known, but they don't really know who they're targeting. That's the problem. They're going door to door, they're sending out, they're holding news conferences, but 17% of the voters, registered voters, are going to vote. So who are those 17%? And that's the problem they have, is they're really in the dark as to who they should be targeting with their message.
But in addition, they're not able to garner the type of earned media that we've seen in the past because most of them are novices. So even if you have signs, we are the home of worshiping yard signs, but even if you have a sign or something like that, like Tom said, who is your target? And that's something that a first-time candidate, it's a tough thing to figure out. I will say so myself. From experience.
Found that out last council election, 2 council elections ago.
I'm going to tell on myself. I ran when we were redistricting in '93.
No one remembers
that.
That was the first time.
Yeah, that was the first time. So so still figuring it out all this time later.
Let's talk about the debate. We want to make sure that we get that up, let you know when it is. It is this Wednesday. It is September the 4th, 7 to 8 o'clock. And you can see it live right here on 13 ABC. Diane Larson's going to moderate. Tom Troy's on the panel. Bill Horman's on the panel. Yours truly. Skylar, you come on.
Come on
in.
I'm invited.
But the challenge is to bring questions to the forum that these candidates haven't heard yet.
Let's try to ask questions that will focus the issues on what Toledo faces in the next 4 years. And one of the things I'm hearing a lot from council people that they're interested in is enhancing the neighborhoods and the economic vitality of businesses in the neighborhoods.
All right, we'll address that, and the council the mayoral candidates will have a chance to ask other candidates questions as well. Have a chance to mix it up a little bit. Thanks, guys, very much. Have a happy Labor Day.
Thank you.
Rest of the weekend.
Good to be here.
And we'll see you next time on Conklin & Company. Take care, everybody.